Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Monday, May the 4th be with you, 2026, and today we're talking about growing peanuts, for those of you who can grow peanuts, of course, and fowl in the cover crops on purpose. So let's do it. All right, happy Star Wars Day, my creatures. How was the weekend for you all? Ours was busy, robust, I guess you could say, mostly with soccer, of course. The youth soccer season has just 2 more weekends for us, but in farming news, we did get hammered with a heavy frost, and I think right now we're getting hammered with a little bit of rain. Now, the night before that heavy frost came in, they were calling for 36 degrees, so, just over like 2 degrees Celsius, so just over freezing. And I knew we'd get a patchy frost at that temperature, so I had most of, the sensitive stuff covered. But what I didn't expect was to hit 31 degrees, just below freezing, for an hour on Sunday morning with crystal clear skies, which led to a pretty heavy frost and ultimately some pretty good damage on our potatoes. Yeah, 2 days later, the bad news is the potatoes definitely took a hit, although they are regrowing, I can see out of their stems. However, also taking a hit is the nearby Johnson grass. So, silver linings and all that good stuff. Now, potatoes are not super cold hardy, but they're a little bit cold hardy and they will likely bounce back. But what was looking like a stellar potato season may turn out to be a meh one because I didn't cover them. That's on me. But I didn't expect it to drop 5 degrees in the forecast overnight, so that wasn't great. Anyway, we'll see how they do. They're relatively resilient, but in the end, like I said, I should have probably covered them. The forecast, however, tells me that it's looking good to go for the next week, in theory. We'll watch that closely as I have some peppers and field tomatoes, as well as, today's topic, crop, ready to roll out and put in the garden ASAP. Anyway, how are things in your neck of the woods? Let us know, or better yet, send us a 20-second farm video clip to farmermike@notillgrowers.com. Just upload that to Dropbox or Google Drive or whatever, and share it with Mike. Love to see those. All right. So it is Monday, where every week this year we are digging into a single less talked about crop in a series we're calling Planting and Raving, or at least I'm calling it that. Today, the crop we're going to call out is peanuts. Now, for sure, I know there are a lot of people who have peanut allergies, and in fact, that's part of why I wanted to do this topic in general. If you do plan to grow peanuts, you have to be thoughtful about harvesting and storing them for those who may not be able to eat anything from places that process peanuts. So this is a big concern if you are selling them. So in the first segment, we'll do the basic rundown in terms of varieties and marketing and all that good stuff. In the third segment, we'll grow and then carefully harvest, cure, and store them. And this topic actually comes via request from Patreon member Rob Hazel, who asked, quote, "Hi, Jesse. I don't recall any previous discussion about growing peanuts." You're right, Rob. "I know peanuts are grown in the southern U.S. because of their long growing season, but I remember my grandfather growing them here in Zone 7B on our family farm where I am now farming. I would like to try them just for family consumption, imagining how good freshly roasted ones might be. Indeed, they're very good. Any info and recommendations you might have would be appreciated. For instance, can they be started in trays or soil blocks successfully to get a jump on their 140 to 145 days to maturity? If so, I think I could just squeeze them in with some row cover and some luck and the weather. Thanks," end quote. All right, well, great questions here. And the answer is that peanuts can, like sweet potatoes, be grown much further north than even where we are. You just need to seek out the shorter day length varieties. 145 days would be a lot. You can usually get them done in about 120. We're in Zone 6B and have grown them several times over the years to great success. But they definitely do take a while, and I like to personally start them in soil blocks in April to get a jump on that long growing season. I've got a tray going right now, in fact, like I said, and plan to put that out maybe this week. We'll see what the forecast says. Our last frost date is the 12th of May, or at least that's what I consider it, after hitting 24 degrees on May 12th in 2020, which was a nice cherry on top of that particular spring. Anyway, yes, although this is typically thought of as a southern crop, peanuts, you can grow them further north, and yes, you will likely have to engage in some amount of season extension to do so. So getting shorter day varieties, that's a good place to start. Starting them in trays in the greenhouse also helps, and maybe even protecting them through colder nights will be key to getting them, to full production. Now, peanuts take about 110 to 120 days to mature, give or take. depends on the weather, depends on the sunshine, all those things. That is a full season for most of us, similar to sweet potatoes, or our sweet potatoes. At least some sweet potatoes are faster. If you can hunt down some 100-day varieties of peanuts, that obviously will help to get them to maturity in colder regions. I will also say from the outset, there's almost no profitability in a crop that takes, the entire season to grow. That's 2 to 3 rounds of lettuce, radishes, green onions, etc. that all will make more money per square foot than peanuts ever will. Like, you could get 3 crops out of that same space in that same amount of time, and each of those crops would be worth more money. But for fun, or for some boiled peanuts or roasted peanuts, they're worth it. And like I said, I'm going to grow some myself again this year for just exactly that reason. Now, peanuts come in many different shapes, sizes, and colors. There are the white ones, black ones, red ones, striped ones, and everything in between. This year, I bought mine from Buffalo Seed Company, who has maybe like the best peanut selection that I've found. I've also in the past gotten them from Southern Exposure Seeds in Virginia. However, if you're in a different region than I am, just looking at your, like local seed purveyors and seeing what they have may be the best approach. They may have something that with the, like right care can be pulled off in whatever region that you happen to be in. The Tennessee Red Valencia is probably the most common variety, and no shame in growing those. They're tasty and consistent and fast to maturity, relatively speaking. But if you've got a longer growing season and you're going to grow like a crop largely for fun, or maybe for certain chefs, then venture out a bit and try some different things. Let your hair down a little bit. Now, if you're going to sell them, you need to establish the market for that right now. Like, you have to have somewhere where the peanuts are going to go. Otherwise, you just have a bunch of peanuts, which isn't the worst problem in the world, but, can be a problem for a non-profitable crop. You can do farmers markets, but with raw peanuts, how are you going to package them and keep those with allergies safe? You cannot reuse the containers that you use for peanuts for other crops. The crops cannot mingle. You can't touch the peanuts and to then touch other things. It gets pretty complicated pretty fast. If you do want to sell peanuts, I think looking for ways to process them, boiled peanuts or roasted peanuts, for instance, is going to prove to be an easier thing for handling, and then you can just bring them prepackaged. Some restaurants do use peanuts, obviously, and will be open to using your peanuts, but you would want to touch base with those now before ever planting a seed, because some restaurants will not mess with raw peanuts in their kitchens for the allergy nightmare it would cause. Though maybe, they would buy your boiled peanuts as an option, just throwing that out there. This will 100% depend on the restaurant and their risk tolerance. Just be mindful of any cross-contamination, cross-contact with other crops, marketing material, bins, etc. Peanuts need to be kept safely away from other crops if you are selling them, which can mean their own closed bins for harvest and transport, and individual packaging for the market itself. Just really think it through, and I'll post a little thing about allergy-safe farming from the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, love them, in the show notes, and we'll talk a bit more about it in the third segment. There are something like 17 different allergens found in peanuts, and those who are allergic can have severe reactions, so definitely take it seriously and avoid any sort of contamination as best you can. And yes, the shells do contain or can contain enough trace amounts of the allergen-causing proteins for some people to get a reaction, so just be vigilant about it. All right, so for me, for starting the seeds of peanuts, we start in 2 by 2 inch soil blocks, that's like 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters, in April or May. I grow them until they are pretty large, usually 3 weeks or so, and we're past that last chance of frost. That's when I can go ahead and start thinking about planting them. So I want to start them probably about 4 weeks before I plan to plant them. If I were in a colder climate or a colder season, I would put row cover over them after I plant them in the first week or so, just to make sure they get settled in nicely and that they are kept, warm enough. And obviously, like, deer and little critters will find peanuts quite delectable. So you also have to think about that. Now, in the third segment, we'll talk about planting and spacing and keeping them alive and that good stuff. But first, we're going to take a quick break. And when we return, we'll get a little fowl with some cover crops. Well, that didn't come out quite right. Anyway, BRB.
Hey, I have a cut flower farm in Zone 8B, South Carolina. These are my seed-grown dahlias. I do have some tuber-grown as well, but I just left these guys in the ground and didn't do anything to them, and they obviously are just fine. We're having our first bloom, and it is April the 29th or 30th, so they're doing just fine.
Today's episode is brought to you by BCS America. If you're practicing no-till or low-till farming, you know that heavy equipment is often the enemy of your soil structure. That's where BCS two-wheeled tractors come in. Built for small farms, market gardens, and regenerative growers, BCS tractors give you the power to manage beds efficiently without unnecessary compaction. For the low and no-till grower, there are two attachments that change the game. The BCS Power Harrow stirs only the top inch or two of soil to incorporate soil amendments and create a perfect seed bed without soil inversion or pulling up weed seeds. And when it's time to terminate cover crops, that flail mower shreds organic matter into a beautiful, nutrient-rich mulch right on top of the bed. To find your local dealer and see the full lineup of attachments designed for the way you farm, head to bcsamerica.com. That's bcsamerica.com. All right, back to the show. A quick and loving reminder that if you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I do try to get to questions from everywhere, but I almost always only have time for the Patreon question. So if you want a question answered on here, that's the best way to do it. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Gerard Holodeck, who asks, quote, any thoughts on using chickens, ducks, geese, or a mix of the three to terminate winter cover crop and prep the garden, end quote. All right, so great and interesting question here. And yes, for sure, I do have some thoughts. I should say, I think adding fowl in with cover cropping has a lot of potential. Cover crops can utilize the nitrogen really well, growing a lot of valuable biomass and retaining it for the next crop. Love that. I'm all for it. However, in terms of if they could terminate a cover crop and prep it for the next crop, well, not exactly, or not entirely, but sort of. So first, ducks and chickens and geese can technically be raised together, but they need different things in terms of management. So when it comes to talking about animals, obviously, put their well-being and happiness first and plan your crops and pens and egg mobiles and waterers and feed troughs, etc. for easy movement. And if you want them to help with the cover crop termination, plan to have the coops be able to fit directly over a section of cover crops or beds overnight so that they can really smash it down with their, let's just say fertilizer. Like if you use semi-permanent beds, that's the width that you'd want to consider building your coops to, maybe wide enough to cover two 30-inch bed or like 75 centimeter beds, for instance. Or for us, maybe, we have these 4 foot wide, 122 centimeter beds. Maybe we just want like a brooder or something that just covers a single bed. So let's say you have a tall cover crop that you were trying to terminate this way. You would move the coop or coops over top of a section and then slowly move it down that bed or down that section. You will likely have to press the cover crop down first before you move the coop over because it's kind of, just technically speaking, it'd be a little difficult to force the coop to do it. But anyway, that will help, but it won't 100% kill the cover crop necessarily. And if you are on raised beds, that will be complicated as well because coops tend to be stiff on the bottom and will leave gaping holes for critters to work their way in overnight, which is not great. Now, you could smash the cover crop down and then just let a big flock of chickens and ducks and geese or whatever over top of it, but the cover crop will likely stand back up. If not while they're there, then shortly thereafter. The concentration would have to be quite high to really terminate it. Like you'd need a lot of animals to really, really knock it down and terminate it. And it could also cause some pollution issues. So you have to balance those things. Now, if you could do a classic crimping and then add fowl in with, like a heavy density, that could work a bit better because the cover crop would already be dead, but the animals won't really stomp it down and terminate it for you, or at least not uniformly. Not in my experience, at least. Maybe with a tender cover crop like buckwheat or crimson clover, but I still have my doubts. As for prepping the soil beneath the cover crop, not really. Now, they just aren't really going to do that. Now, if you're looking for, tilth at least, that's not really going to happen. Nitrogen-wise, they will prep it absolutely, but it's also important, especially if you're selling produce, but even if you're just eating it, to account for the 90 to 120 day rule, which again is required by the Food Safety Modernization Act, that's called FSMA, and the USDA Organic, and means that when raw manure is placed on a plot, food that touches the ground in that plot, like lettuce or squash or carrots or whatever, cannot be harvested within 120 days. Food that does not touch the ground, like tomatoes or peppers, cannot be harvested 90 days from the manure application. So chickens being on there is considered a manure application, and you have to follow those rules if you're going to be selling that produce. So yeah, it just gets tricky fast if you're selling. But when we had chickens, I loved them in the cover crops early in the fall to give them a boost, and then again in the spring to, give them another little boost before the long season crops went in, like peanuts. So I didn't terminate cover crops with them so much as just like use them for fertility and for cleaning out weed seeds from previous mulch layers and that sort of stuff. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Where you can involve fowl, you should, but termination may be tough and inconsistent. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break and talk about the only food I know of to be named after a comic strip. That's true. Ask your favorite food anthropologist. Yeah, be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Grown By. Grow smarter with Grown By, the farmer-owned cooperative. Grown By is the platform for online sales of everything, custom and traditional CSAs, halves of beef, flower bouquets, wholesale to restaurants, and now Grown By supports in-person sales too. Their new app, Grown By Register, you can supercharge your market and farm stand, finally bringing together your online and offline sales and customer data. Grown By is proud to make local food accessible by processing SNAP benefits online and in person right within the app. Grown By helps you put your best food forward. Schedule a demo at coop.grownby.com/no-till. That's coop.grownby.com/no-till. Today's episode is also brought to you by Good Agriculture. If the season is picking up and the pile of receipts is starting to grow, you're not alone. Good Agriculture handles farm bookkeeping so you can stay ahead of the mess before it piles up. They keep your books organized each month, help you understand what's coming in and what's going out, and show you where your farm stands so you can make better business decisions throughout the season. If you're behind, they'll help get everything caught up. They also help farmers find funding and stay ahead of grant deadlines. You run the farm, they help the business. Learn more at goodagriculture.com/info. That's goodagriculture.com/info. All right, back to the show. All right, so back to the peanut growing end of things. Peanuts, like all crops, enjoy fertile, well-draining soil. No surprise there. So that may mean broad forking if need be, but it definitely means some good compost, possibly some other amendments to balance your soil out via a soil test. They are a legume, so they do a decent job of, fixing their own nitrogen. But in general, you want to make sure that there is some nitrogen there for them, just in case, and especially for when they get started. For spacing, you can go as close to 6 to 8 inches apart, 15 to 20 centimeters, with one row on your standard market garden bed. Those are like those 30-inch beds that you typically see, or 75 centimeters. Or for us, because we grow on wider beds, which would be like 48 inches or 122 centimeters, we can usually go to, like 2 rows on that. For growing, peanuts are a very weird and awesome plant. Like if you've never grown them, they're very interesting. They have flowers like a normal fruiting crop, but unlike pretty much any other crop, the flowers don't produce fruit, or at least not directly. They send out these little shoots called pegs that go into the soil, and on the end of those pegs is where the peanuts develop. So in terms of growing, to make sure there is ample food for the pegs to get growing, hilling is often required. So they are grown somewhat like potatoes in that way, where you hill them up as they grow to increase yield. Then it's just a matter of mulch, if you have it, or keeping the soil clean and waiting. Peanuts, unlike sweet potatoes, can be, and often should be, harvested after a frost or two. Like you don't want your sweet potatoes to get frosted. That can damage the actual tubers. But in peanuts, it's fair game. In the deep south, that doesn't really get an early frost. The plant will just start to yellow and you can pretty much just like harvest them then. And after that, it's all about curing. Again, any tools you use and any space that you use should not be, the same as other products you sell. I cannot emphasize that enough. Don't make anyone sick. A lot of times, if it's sunny and dry, growers will harvest peanuts and set them on the ground to cure and dry for a few days. Then you can start removing them from the stems, which is just a, pretty long process. Sorry, again, there's almost no profitability to be had in this crop on a small scale, but you can also do that curing just like in one corner of the greenhouse where you don't obviously have any sort of food stuff that you would be transferring, peanut proteins to. And it usually takes like a couple weeks. Now, I love a raw peanut, truly a treat. So you can wait until they dry a bit, eat them raw, or go ahead and cook them, whatever you want. I personally love me some boiled peanuts. A fun pairing for that, in fact, use any excess kimchi or sauerkraut liquid that you have, especially if it's spicy in your boiling liquid, for a little spice and acidity. Otherwise, let us know what you all do with your fresh peanuts or anything that I missed there in growing them. And that rounds out this peanut breakdown. Charlie Brown. Don't forget, No Till Growers is a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Big thank you to Michelle. Big thank you to the No Till Growers Board of Directors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to the Rebellion, May the 4th. Anyway, also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of May, you get a shout on the show. So big shout outs today to our new bump up. Big shouts to Hudson Carter. Thank you so much for the support. As a reward, we get a ridiculous story. Let's say all anyone knew about this man was that he was quiet. He kept to himself in this trailer park that he lived in and never went to anything social. You know, he would go out and he'd walk his two dogs, two toy poodles, a few times a day around the outside of the park, but he kind of stayed away from people. He would smile if someone smiled at him. He would answer questions, but if anyone really spoke to him, he was very short. He did not really want to talk to anyone. And he never really left the park except for like once a week, Fridays at 4 p.m. He would get into his old Ford Bronco and he would leave his two toy poodles at home. And then you'd come back around 3 hours later, and it was like clockwork. That was like the one time of the week this guy would ever leave his house. And then one day, a couple of local teenagers decided they should kind of investigate and wanted to figure out what this guy was up to and planned to see what they could learn at 4 p.m. on a Friday. But that is for tomorrow. Sign up spending on the biggest mistake. That's it. Yep. You dwell on that. All right. Thanks for watching and/or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.